Like I mentioned at the end of the last video, we are back on Infinite Velocity. Shambler taking to the left-hand side, fighting Neblime, now on the right-hand side. The positions have swapped. Shambler and Neblime are 1 for 1 here in this series so far. What will happen in this game, you may be wondering? Well, what will happen is Neblime will be Cordovan. So far, what we've noticed about the Zerg play out of Neblime is that he likes to build a macro hatch as opposed to an expand. So that's kind of interesting as far as, trying to get some sort of macro, like you're building an additional production facility basically instead of an expansion. And it's okay, that's why he was building the sunken colonies, the Circuith colonies, Cesians as they're called now. Yeah, I was wondering about that. So he was wary of a recall. It's interesting because he didn't end up going for an Ovaleth, right? In the first game of this set, we saw Neblime get our Didact recalled, right? And that would have been an option for Shambler in that game too, but obviously the didn't end up happening. He just stuck to the Empyreans with a couple of Magisters. Now, the important point about Magisters in that last game is that obviously they increase the attack range that units have against targets that are afflicted by the Magister's attack. So if I attack this Hatcherosk, units will get +2 range targeting the Hatcherosk, right? It's pretty significant, obviously. It doesn't stack. It's a one-time thing, and it does expire after a certain amount of time. And in that context, it seems like both of our players are sort of reflecting on the way that the games had gone. It looks like Neblime is really dead set on going for the Hydrith opener. And I think it does make sense to go for this versus Protoss in particular. It does give you some units that can contend with the enemy's openers. And, obviously Hydras in particular are probably some of the best DPS that you're going to get for single target, which is chief what you want, generally speaking, in PvZ, right? So he sees the double gateway opener again, and so this is sort of like they're kind of just handshake agreeing, yeah, we're just going to do the same thing. Although a fast Kagrant this time kind of tells me that maybe Neblime wants to expand as opposed to a in-base macro hatch. But we'll see what happens, because his first larva is going to be a Skittercore, and that is a little bit more resource intensive than the Hydra. Now the Kagrant is complete, and it will immediately be a Circuith, so he's not going to go ahead and wait on that, just instantaneously mutating it. So this will delay any tempo that he could have a macro hatch for, regardless of whether or not, well, another Hatcherosk. It doesn't matter if it's in-base or if it's an expansion or something. And this is something I'm very closely monitoring myself, because I want to see if people can safely play for an expansion first or something like that. I do feel like, actually, especially on a map like this, you could do that. But it really depends on the timing of this Nidus access, right? We can see it's now available, and the Skittercores are idling right in front of the Nidus this time around, so it definitely feels like Neblime is cautious and aware of that, and he will be taking an expansion first as opposed to a macro hatch, so this is sort of like a little bit more like what we might suspect out of a Zerg matchup in general, where they do go for an early expo. And able to do all of this off of just a single Hatcherosk, right? So that does mean that he's behind in workers, because obviously he's been building some military, and he is just going to go ahead and kill the Nidus. It's actually fortuitous timing, because as soon as Shambler walks over here, he's going to see it's dead and the Kagro is receding. If he's attentive, he'll notice that the Kagro is still there spread max, which means obviously that it had only just recently been killed. Whereas if it had been killed a lot sooner, then there wouldn't be any Kagro there, right? But I don't think that's something that was picked up exactly by what Shambler did. He's going to go for a Warden, not sure whether or not to expect more Skiths. And we do see a couple of additional workers here in the production queue for Neblime, which is great, because it does mean that he'll be able to catch up with workers. Obviously, he does have a crazy amount of tempo on the expansion compared to Shambler, who is just still on the 3 gates, starting to bank a little bit of gas. He'll undoubtedly be using that for things like Ecclesiasts. Actually, the sheer number of Skiths that are in play for Neblime feels like it's not going to be as relevant for very long. He's got, 4 Skiths, actually, so it's less than I even thought. And it doesn't really seem like it'll be something that can be done very well. If he attacks while the army is away, the Warden won't hold up to 4 Skiths. But I think really what Neblime wants to do is confirm no expansion, right? Confirm that he has the macro advantage. It'll be the first time that he has the, worker count advantage eventually, but also the base advantage and stuff, timing advantage, I guess, on that in the early game in this entire series. The first time he was contained to 1 base for a while by Shambler's vassals. The second game, obviously, he lost a lot of workers to the first Nidus push, and he should have just noticed that the army just left, which could open up a counterattack option. Again, there's some units being trained here, but, the Warden won't hold up to 4 skits, and in fact, he's even going to go ahead and start just picking off some of the units that are reinforcing, and that will cause Shambler to recall his army, which is very fortuitous timing for neblime, as he's only now getting his Hatrask up at the 3rd base, and he doesn't really have any units to defend this, right? He also doesn't have any tech available to do so. So Shambler actually has a huge window of opportunity where he has kill pressure, and he's recalled his army because he's afraid of, maybe more skits showing up. I do think that this Ecclesia should be saved. Yep, it will be recalled there. And another Warden, or no, now a Matrix going down. So this is not a bad shout, because obviously Matrices can shoot up to 4 targets, and that is going to give them pretty good consistent damage here. What I think neblime needs at this point is not just a bunch of Kagrins turned into circuits. To fight that ground army that Shambler has amassed so soon, he is going to need a lot of Izira cores for the front line so that he can use Crushing Tide to manage the shields and repeatedly manage the Zealot count in particular. I think the Zealots are going to be really scary if they end up descending on even the Circuit line. So again, I still think Shambler has kill pressure here. The skits are growing in number now, going up to a count of 7. But I think with the Matrix and the Warden, it doesn't feel like it's going to be able to do too much. He ends up picking off something at the extremities. But yeah, you can see here he's already starting to take a decent amount of damage. Getting shellacked there, and he knows that the army is not turning back now, so he's going to recall his Skither cores for the frontline defense and adding more circuits. But this game could be over very quickly. I'm not 100% sure. It really comes down to whether or not Shambler gets distracted or picked apart. You could see that his pathing wasn't super good over here because this is a very tight angle, and that actually allows the skits to pick apart one of the Drakidins. Every bit helps here. Only having 2 Drakidins actually is a pretty big deal because those are fairly good, consistent damage dealers versus something like a Circuith. Obviously, they do get reduced by armor quite substantially, so but even still, it's something that's worth noting. Here come the Zealots charging forward. 2 circuits finishing just in time to give the total up to 5, but instantaneously falling back to try to isolate, attacking the Skither cores separately from the base defenses. The Zealots are getting shoot up during this process, so this is definitely very, very favorable for neblime. And he even withdraws with saving a couple of skits. You have to think if there was a 3rd Drakidin with this army, most of these skits would probably have gone down. And the army control on the Zealots in particular was not super, sublime, we'll say. Actually, I feel like he could have maybe just walked right past the circuits, this one just finishing in the middle of that battle, and maybe charged into the main or something, right? But maybe he was just surprised to see so many. I mean, the other thing to think about, too, is that you're looking at this as, as you are, right? You're staring down the barrel of all of those circuits. There were no other military units, right? And the Skither cores can't handle, it takes them a long time to kill Zealots. So I feel like the Zealots could have just charged up here and absolutely eviscerated neblime's base. At least killed a lot of workers in the main. Maybe even escaped to up here where there are no base defenses whatsoever and forced a lot of, dead workers alongside. Maybe even ended the game right then and there because there were still a lot of Zealots at the start of that fight, right? But anyway, at this stage, it's going to be pretty much all Drakidins with the Ecclesias, the surviving forces from that attack. We did see a couple of... Well, we saw a couple of Zealots there. It doesn't look like neblime wants to contend with that engram. I thought maybe he could have tried to force a cancel on it or something, but he did only have the 3 skits. He scouts around with one. We do have one lone Ecclesia sticking around, hanging out with his wang out in the middle of the map. But aside from that, I mean, yeah, you got 3 Hatrasks in the main for neblime. You're scaling up towards that tier 2 timing. He's only a scant few gas returns away from being able to drop an Iral Iris. So we'll see where that ends up going right here in the main. Not a bad shout. And no embassy, no other tech at all for Shambler means that he's definitely going to be behind. Economically speaking, he's already behind so many workers. It feels like, he has missed an opportunity now, and it feels like the Zerg are starting to scale up quite substantially with all these macro hatches in the main. So, neblime making Zerg look pretty potent, even at this stage, without the Larvosk Cesian available at tier 1. We'll see what he ends up doing, as Shambler is going to go for a 3rd base, wisely going for a more macro-oriented game. Does feel like he should be benefiting from embassies, and not just for witnesses, but for extra worker production. Certainly something to consider. And just purely spamming out a bunch of workers to try to saturate. Again, this is pretty greedy play from neblime. If there was any attack, he has no military units. The guy's got 3 military units and they're all Skither cores. That's what I'm talking about here is, I think neblime is showing off a very greed-focused, macro-oriented playstyle. And Shambler, he's got a lot of military units. He's starting to build some static defense, adding more military. Still no tech. Still no interesting, interest in moving outside of the tier 1 and outside of the gateway. And at this point, we've got tier 2. We've got a Quazeth coming. We've got some Larvosks being added to the fray, a Mutath, and of course the Backtith coming out the Backtith swamp there. So yeah, getting access to tier 2 assault units out of the Hydrith Den evolution, getting access to tier 1 Swarm, which is whatever. He might immediately mutate that. He might not. He might just stick to Vorvs. And obviously getting access to the Mutath Spire. We know that that's something that neblime is a big fan of. He likes mutas. We'll see what he ends up doing here. I'm really quite surprised that Shambler has gone the route of just going straight into Argosy again. He's not comfortable, maybe, exploring other tech options. Instead, just going straight into, Gateway, Argosy. Obviously, could be capping his geysers as well, but he's kept relatively low in terms of resources, I think predominantly because he doesn't really have access to... the main thing that I look at here, and I think, man, like, this guy really could do some damage if he just moved across the map. And now we're starting to see some more units be added, and I just feel like his window is closing, right? There was no punish on the greed-oriented build and approach that came out of neblime. Engram zoning away the Skither Core. We'll spot some Stargates being added alongside an Argosy finishing. I don't think he spotted the second one in production. And he'll see that the army is still at home. So neblime at this point really doesn't have any fear. Flocking out with a whole host of mutas. Right at this point we're talking about, what, is that 16 mutas in total, but only 14 moving across the map right now. And Ovaleth filled with Drolets to take this island base. And down here a Skither Core just holding guard to give a bit of advance warning. Some of these circuits have turned into Scortrits. That's a tier 2 one for you. Capping his geysers. He's looking in control mechanically and macro focused as well. So we'll have to see what happens here. I mean, there is an Empyrean finishing. It can handily deal with mutas, but it's, well, I say finishing, it's actually only barely halfway across. So as well as the whole army, moving aside. I feel like Shambler has been flying blind with no embassy, feeling like he's not exactly able to immediately identify what needs to be done. He's not going to cancel the Stargate, so that will be brutally destroyed, as well as the other one. And now the army is coming back, which means he's not going to get anything done outside of the game. Now, if neblime jumps straight onto this Empyrean, he might be able to kill it, but it doesn't look like that's going to be of interest to him. He's really trying to focus down the Argosy. But good luck, man. It's got a lot of armor, a lot of HP. It's a very, very durable structure. Feels like to me, okay, you stopped the Stargates from going down, and now you're forced, you mostly, I think the victory there was tempo, because neblime's just going to expand more, right? He's taken these top-middle bases that are islands, really using the Beaver's map layouts to good effect here. And it looks like he's going to establish a Nidus to take over that base over there. Although this is an interesting location for the Nidus, so I'm not 100% sure if that's where he intended it for it to go. A whole host of Zethar cores coming out. You could imagine a lot of them turning into Vorvs and doing very well versus Dracodons. Crucible is going to come out to try to enchant the Argosy on some of these gateways and presumably make room, because it is also a power node similar to the Pylon. So in theory, it'll make room for other things. Now we finally see Shambler capping geysers, or at least the one in his main. He doesn't have that much gas, so he can't exactly cap the ones elsewhere just yet. And he doesn't have a lot of, he's not really spending his minerals either. He's now starting to go ahead and queue up some Zealots. Does have a Crucible finishing pretty soon. And, we obviously see the mutas flying over in this location. We see a dead Scribe. So it looks like maybe there was an attempt to expand some of the Zeths populating a couple of the areas, and we obviously have the Vorvs out as well. Yeah, this is, again, I mean, the Zerg seems in command of this base. They are setting up the Nidus over here, starting to build some workers in this location. So neblime doing pretty well to keep his hold on the map. But I don't want to say that it's over just yet. I mean, the worker count in terms of effective mining is probably about the same right now, until this base comes online, of course. We see another gateway being added. Obviously, the Stargate plan was foiled, even though you'd think he could use, land effects or something out of that, or maybe, I don't know. There's a couple of different things that he could have used, it feels like. And, of course, we have more Empyreans on the way. Zethar Core is just filling out across the whole map, giving vision. It feels like, with the Yachts to Lava Form coming as well, neblime surely is just going to take this one. He's made a whole host of workers he's going to send through that Nidus. Looks like he's already done so, capping the geysers over here. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. neblime looks like he's going to take over this game just with the macro steamroll. A whole host of Protoss units are starting to fly away and move out. And they will, of course, be spotted by some of these Zeths. I think some of them might end up pathing over these to reveal them, but just barely not. Man, that's like... you can't plan for that, I feel like. You probably could. Oh, well, there you go. One of them gets spotted. The other one might have also just been temporarily spotted there. But so that's going to be advanced warning of the fight coming through. More Drolettes coming in through the Nidus. Not a whole lot of units over here, actually. So technically, Shambler has a puncher's chance of just stamming, screaming into that base and smashing into it. The Empyreans are starting to mass up. He's getting up to that very healthy count of 4 again. And we don't see any Vithrilisks in response, so, we'll see. But the Othstel over here is going to be pretty big. There's no Kaffirlosks here. The Zorkis is going down. That'll turn into Zarkaver cores if it is able to upgrade. And Shambler is going to be surprised to see that there's no base over here. Again, this feels like he's playing without any vision. He has no embassies, no witnesses. He's not harvesting from this ridge, despite being gas-starved right now. Isn't capping any of these other geysers, and not even capping the second one in the main. It feels like he's leaving a lot of money on the table here, as well as obviously being behind a lot of bases. So his ground army will be revealed. The air army is not going to spot this base, although there are a whole bunch of defenses morphing over here. And we obviously have, what is this? Still 13 mutas. Not really scary to 5 Empyreans, but something else to keep in mind. And not a whole lot of Bactylisks, and obviously, again, not a whole lot of Vithrilisks. Actually, 0 Vithrilisks so far. But Tier 3 is done. How fast do we go for the Ultra Cavern? Instantaneous mutation. It's not Ultrac anymore. It's Ultrav Cavern, actually. You're going to have to bear with me as I remind myself of all of the new names. Mutath turning into Sovril as well, so or Tosvril. And that's going to be a big deal. Engrams are finishing, but I think they'll be focused down before they can do too much damage. There it is. So neither of those are going to get canceled. We'll see if the Nexus will be. I'll keep it selected. And the ground army is withdrawing. Man, every single time it feels like Shambler could have a chance to punish the greed and attack at a good timing before his opponent has too many units. It's just gone, and he's not even going to be canceling this Nexus, it looks like. He was given an opportunity. Actually, he's just going to withdraw. That seems like a mistake. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe he wants to wait for it to finish so he can destroy it for maximum punishment. But yeah, that's a bit interesting. Now, the army is already starting to move out over here. It's mostly Tier 1. So this army should be totally fine. The Empyreans are starting to tickle the units in the bottom. And we have a whole host of Calculisks being mutated over here. See, it looks like neblime is considering what to make with all of his minerals. His Izira cores are doing pretty well to hold the Zealots at bay, but at this point, the Empyreans are starting to shell them a little bit too much. His Calculisks are not done yet. They're still mutating, still taking their time. I think he's getting used to the fact that all of the, obviously, like one of the things you have to get used to now as Zerg is that the time costs of these units are much higher. So you want to mutate them in more safe locations. But okay, we've got 16 Calculisks. Now, he doesn't want to stack up over here, but it looks like Shambler is going to allow his enemy to make it over there and hit him a little bit there. But you can see, like, the Calculisks are just very vulnerable, and that ends up not working out in his favor at all. So now the Zoristelets are here. We do have Gorger cores mutating into Zarkaver cores. That's going to take some time. The Tier 2 circuit defenses, anti-surface, dealing a number on the Zealots. And we have I thought we had a Matrolith out somewhere, actually. Oh, no, I guess the Vorva cores were probably applying Ensnare. Yeah, this is starting to get a little bit dire. There's all of these mutas over here, but I mean, maybe they could pick off some of these isolated Empyreans somewhere. Definitely feels like there's it's going to be really, really hard for the Zealots to really make too much headway versus these Bactylisks, but some of them are occupied onto this Empyrean, which will actually go down, surprisingly, because, with some of the help from the Spear Tip. Here come the Zarkaver cores. Again, you don't want to stack these up, because that's where all of the damage is going to come from via the Empyreans. And it doesn't look like the Zarkaver cores are even too focused on killing the Empyreans. They're busy dealing with the ground army. So Shambler is keeping his Empyreans alive for a very long amount of time. But at the same time, these Zarkaver cores are breaking through. So the Zerg, even losing a base, not the end of the world. They are going to start to chase down and pick off these Empyreans, especially if Shambler is not careful. It doesn't look like there was a counterattack anywhere else, despite all of the map knowledge. And yet, at the same time, there's an engram, 3 engrams with a Crucible enchanting some of them. It does feel like the army has fallen into very critical numbers here, honestly for both players, but especially for Shambler, as he only has 4 Empyreans, 2 of which might be on a collision course with the rest of the army. And, okay, yeah, they're doing a lot of good damage as far as the, splash is concerned, because there was no split here, but you don't want to lose those units, man. It's really, really quite something. We even have Ultra Cores out. We obviously have the Vithrilisks up. So this is starting to get into a longer game. As Thraitholeths are out as well. You can use Carapace Storm to block the Empyreans from dealing damage to your ground targets. Maybe something like a Bactylisk Vithril combo can deal with them at that point. There's not really that many. He's only got 1 Argosy in production. He's only got 2 of them actually pumping out Empyreans. So it feels like, his number is pretty low, but how are you going to deal with the engrams? That's something to worry about And by flying into them is probably not the answer. Ew, the splash it hurts my soul. He could obviously evolve these units, and probably should evolve these units before moving any forward. His Elthith's Mound is complete. Try saying that with a fucking lip injury. And actually, the Empyreans are engaging a little bit sooner than they probably should. Some Tozgralisks are here with Crushing Tide to try to help. And the Vithralisks are also trying to chase to reduce the armor. Good splash to reduce armor of the rest of the static defense. And the Engram is occupied with the ground units. One of them has just finished. But I'm not sure that there's that much army strength coming out over here. The Astrathalists are laying down Carapace Swarm, but the Empyreans stayed alive, and there's just so much static defense over here. It feels like this was not the base to attack into, at least not without Cascathalors, which you need a separate structure for. At the same time, it looks like the Engrams will not have a good time defeating the Ultracores. They obviously have Saber Siphon, so they're sustaining through. The Astrathaleth is doing a great job trying to deal with Carapace Swarm. I think the Engram Splash and the Empyrean Splash combine to deal with the Astrathaleth there, so that's going to be it for that. You can obviously hide underneath it with the Bactylisks to try to do some damage, but you can see here, yeah, despite losing the Engrams, and Shambler has so much money backed up in the bank, he didn't even lose that many workers here. And obviously he didn't lose that many Empyreans either. So he's starting to mass up, and it looks like a bad rally of a bunch of workers. Went to the wrong location. He can obviously saturate this base, and he's kept his money somewhat low, but he did obviously reestablish this base down here at his third location. He's got Mutas. They can turn into Tozgralisks, obviously, more Astrathaleths, but really, I think what he needs is some Kaffirlosks pumping out Ultracores or something to that effect. He obviously can mutate his Larvosks into Oxels if he wants to. I'm not sure if he's aware that that's a thing now. But definitely could be pretty based. It's just units all over the place. When games get this long and go for this, well, this isn't even really that long of a game, but when games get to, tier 3, when games get to, having a whole host of different options and such, it can feel like there's just so much stuff happening. You idle 18 workers somewhere. Like, it doesn't necessarily feel like you're as on the ball as you have been. Finally taking yet another base here, so that's good. The last base he obviously took was this, which he did successfully defend from Shambler. A very impactful base to keep holding. Obviously, at this point, the minerals are starting to run dry, and he hasn't reestablished an Excision on that geyser. So that's maybe a bit of an error. He's getting more Gorgocores, definitely recognizes the need for Zarks in this particular case. And where does he want to go from here? He has some Gorgocores out already, he has some Ultracores out. This army is going to get chewed up a lot by the Tozgralisks and of course, the Ultracores. If he can snipe some of these Astrathaleths, that can be a good move. A Plague generates over there, so that's obviously going to keep the shielding from regenerating at all. And he's a little bit cautious because he doesn't want to get plagued himself, obviously. But apparently it doesn't matter to him. just charge on him. Why not? It doesn't last that long, though. It's not like default Plague. The most scary part about it is when your units pop and they spread plague again if they die while they're plagued. So that's where you can get into territory where you're like constantly reapplying the effect. But it's a bit more of like an area denial thing, right? Okay, we have some tier 3 units coming out here, and by some I mean a lot. Just the Tozgralisks are at 12. The Zarkava core count could be higher, and there obviously could be another Ultra Core here to make that 4 as well. But overall, some units getting very confused. Maybe Beaver will think about sealing up these, like a doodad here or something to block that, right? And another one over here. Looks like he intended to do that here, but obviously it didn't end up happening. A lot of defenses at this base. This is obviously not where you want to be then. But look at this. There's a Zethar Core burrowed, and air units and buildings don't reveal those things. So you can definitely go for something like this. And now that he probably won't notice, or maybe he will notice it, but like these Engrams are halfway done. The Empyreans, nowhere to be found. This base is pretty well defended against Empyreans, actually, because it has so many spear tits and they do outrange them. And the Crucibles are just going to get bopped before they can really go down. None of them being canceled, only the Engram now being canceled. The Nexus should also be, but we'll see if Shambler has the wherewithal. Indeed he does. So yeah, there you go. Very, very easy way to just snipe that out and force a cancel on that base. Keep your opponent reduced in efficacy. It looks like the Empyreans have found the angle that they need to attack without being retaliated against too much. But here come a lot of the spear tits, and they do take a little bit of time before they can be focused down. So this is working out okay. If he built like maybe 5 or 10 more or something, I know that sounds really crazy to say, then he would have definitely stood a good chance at stopping this army from scaling up too much. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of these are being bounced on and hit pretty hard. Obviously that's stopping, flash shielding and such. So it does feel like he's already lost 2 or 3 Empyreans so far. It's really hard to see the low HP ones, of course, but so Tozgralisks are here, Mutas are here, Zarkava cores are here. you want to be really careful with how you engage into this fight. And it looks like, and Shambler should have just tried to snipe that army, but it didn't end up happening. And now the Zarkava cores have been able to get on the fight and just blow up a whole host of those Empyreans. It doesn't look like, realistically speaking, neblime has lost anything in that engagement, and all of his air units end up staying alive despite all the splash. So that was a crushing blow for Shambler, who really doesn't have the money to be able to repeatedly produce more Empyreans at that level. He has 4 Argosies, but he doesn't have the income to sustain that kind of production, especially since he's been buying so many Zealots, as you can see here. Stratholeth sort of meandering across the map right now. They're trying to reach a spot that is simply not possible to reach. And actually, these units over here could tickle the Stratholeths. So it's a little interesting to me that, Shambler probably won't notice that here. But yeah, he's just going to have his army pelted. Does he? I don't know. I wouldn't really want to attack into this area without Cascathalors. Cascathalors, maybe even Gazithalors, okay, you can start to do something there. But I mean, even Alcagelisks would be okay because they're so damn durable. But Carapace Swarm Ultra Cores, they can do a little bit, obviously with sustain and taking reduced or no damage. That's pretty good for them. It just feels like it's a very APM intensive thing to do when you could just end up going for, Cascathalors to try to attack in with maybe like something to reveal them just by spamming out the attack forces or whatever. So the Zealots are over here. I don't know what for. I think they're going to go ahead and, they're just going to use the second Nidus to try to attack into this base. So that's a thing that you can use, obviously. The, taking a lot of damage here. Below half HP on those top Zarks. Not what you want to see. And actually, I think he's seen it because of the vision provided by the Excisant there. He's already starting to retaliate. So neblime is not going to end up losing this base after all. And this is just going to be, a whole host of units dying for the Protoss. And another macro cycle just hit, I think, because I just saw a lot of units, a lot of money disappear from the coffers, it looks like. But maybe they were canceled or something because then the money came back. Who knows? Whole host of Droleths coming down to the bottom middle expansion that's been taken in the meantime. Yeah, it doesn't look like a single Droleth even died over here. Or maybe, no, that's a really real core corpse. So yeah, just nothing. Shambler, my man. It looks like he's been hosed. I don't know if he killed the Nidus. It looks like it based on the Zealot positioning. But yeah, that's obviously a bit rough. More Tozgralisks. More Zarkava cores, surely, as well. Looking spooky here if you're Shambler. What do? You've got depleted bases everywhere. No caps on the geysers. No gas really in general. Starting to go for some grand libraries. He has double Argosy in the production, or in production, I should say. I heard an engram shot go off. I'm not exactly sure where. It looks like it was over here somewhere. Yeah, Zethakor ran in here and got slapped. Yeah, attacking in from the south. This is where things could get spooky, right? There's only one engram. The Empyreans are out of position. Best you can do is hope that these new ones finish anytime soon. Ultra cores are getting into position to just charge on in. There are some Stratholeths as well. Some scribes being transferred over get bopped immediately from a rally. And yeah, you don't even need the Carapace Swarm here to engage into this initial force, right? Some of the units are being split and chasing off and zoning away the air, but obviously the Zarkava cores dying there, that's a pretty big part of the anti-splash part of the army. Some Carapace Swarms have gone down to allow the Ultra Cores free entry in, but now the Magisters plus the Empyreans obviously are going to start engaging onto this Tozgralisk swarm, and that's going to be pretty bad. We obviously see some instant remorphs, but the Tozgralisks are indeed going to get focused down here momentarily, especially if they charge directly in, trying to, maybe avoid or intercept it, but that's the wrong play. You got to split them. So it does feel like the Empyreans are going to stay alive here for a very long amount of time, but here comes some Zarkava cores. They can do some pretty good damage, and in fact, some of the Mutids are even going to get a finishing blow onto the Empyreans. But, really a lot of it is depending on whether or not these Empyreans can stay alive. If they can, then maybe Shambler has a chance to at least extend play. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, though. I mean, some of these Empyreans are going to be okay, but or at least this last one might be, but he has one more in production. There's 5 Zarkava cores just holding position here, waiting for it to happen. They probably aren't on hold pause, but yeah, they just weren't interested in attacking just yet. And I think that's just going to be it. It doesn't look like, this can really be something that Shambler can come back from. It feels like he didn't adapt for, a Cantavis, for example, or anything like that anytime soon. His Grand Library did finish. I was told that there was some crazy play that happened with Cantavis Hallucination, but I must not have seen it. And yeah, that Empyrean does finish, but it's just dead. A plague on all of the scribes. That feels overkill, but you know what? Celebrate with some fireworks. This is the closest thing Zerg have to fireworks. Oh my goodness. I've never seen that before. And there you go. Shambler down to just a few bases. Okay, I think maybe this is where we're going to see that, because he's going to extend play. I don't want to write him off, but it does feel like this is a bit silly. I mean, again, as soon as you go Cascathalor here, and he does have the Gezkath Grotto, like he can just like walk in here and kill this, right? He outranges everything, because that's 11 range based on height advantage. Even if it was double height advantage, like down here for 13 range, Cascathalors still outrange that by 1. So that's the extent of which Cascathalors can deal with that. He even has a macro hatch over here, probably not a man or drone. I'm guessing the Droleth just rallied over here by mistake or something. Yeah, a whole host of units are coming out over here on the right-hand side as well, and the engrams on this side, they are machine gunning thanks to Crucibles, but yeah, the Ultra Cores are here as well, and it just doesn't feel like, yeah, we even see, yeah, this is the range of the Cascathalor, by the way, so love that. And yeah, here comes the Cantavis. What will the Cantavises do? Oh, he got the speed boost from absorbing a corpse, but it wasn't enough. Even more Hatcherosks being made. He just wants to make units right here. And it makes sense, too. There's a Cascathalor on the other side of the thing just dealing with that Grand Library. That's the degree of which we have artillery. And yeah, this Nexus is going to be put down pretty soon. We have so many units being built. Shambler is really... I think at this point he's committed to the bit, as opposed to trying to actually win. So, you know. I mean, he has reestablished his Nexus in the... You know, I don't know if he lost the top left base or not, but he's definitely lost his main. He has reestablished that. You can see here the Hallucinate is allowing a Phantom Strike to come in from the static defense structures over here. Not really super effective versus the Ultra Cores, particularly because of the fact that Carapace Swarm is absorbing a lot of the damage. And yeah, you know, it's still good. It's increasing DPS a little bit. Oh, it's not going to be enough. My goodness. 10 kills on that, too. There's something distinctly Starcraft about, you know, Zerg units chasing down and killing Cantavis that are fleeing. I don't know why. It's always been something that I thought of. Dude, look at another fucking outpost. I mean, I don't know. This game was pretty cool just to see the macro-oriented play. And yeah, we even have the victory lap. This is probably what Shambler wanted me to see. With regards to the Cantavis grouping or whatever. But there's a lot of, like, enchanted Crucibles here. And, yeah, at this stage, we're talking about... It doesn't even look like Hallucination plays a part in here. Maybe down here, right with this whole stack. Yeah, they were all stacked up anyway. I don't think that that doesn't read to me as, like, a very insane mechanic. Although one of the things I was thinking about is reducing the splash radius of the engram to help combat that. But, you know, we'll see. We'll have to wait and see what exactly could happen here. I don't think that really is... I'm not concerned about the Hallucination interaction. That doesn't seem that big of a deal to me. Cascathalors are going to be here to wipe this up, and we should see a GG pretty soon. I'll just go ahead and fast forward here. Oh, look at that. A whole bunch of Zealots here. Maybe I was wrong to fast forward, but... I mean, look at the minimap, guys. I was not wrong to fast forward. The impact effect, that's kind of hard to see because of the effect field that happens afterwards, is actually an effect done by Solstice. And I'm a pretty big fan of it, actually. So maybe we can use it for something else. But yeah, pretty cool game to showcase the fact that Zerg can still be powerful with an expansion first even. Although, again, Neblime was so greedy, Shambler could have closed this game like 3 or 4 times, and he just didn't know it, or he didn't sense it, perhaps. So I feel like the way that Neblime got to this location can probably be replicated without having quite so many... Why is he building Nexuses, dude? What an asshole. I think it can be done without building... without being quite so greedy, is sort of what I would say. But yeah, at this point, we're just sort of watching Zerg porn. Hope you guys like the Protoss getting absolutely shellacked. GG is called. And after some silliness at the very end, we do see Neblime taking victory 2-1 in the series. Zerg still got it going on, apparently. And the fact that Shambler didn't close this one out, it felt like he should have. It felt like he had kill pressure so many times. I kind of said everything I needed to say towards the end of that. So normally I do a whole review of the game and the score screen, but really, I think what you watch out for there is definitely, combating the Empyreans. Looks like you don't even need the Vithrilisks after all, which is good for the, health of the game and all that. But yeah, definitely something that, Shambler's going to be scratching his head. Like, what do I integrate next? And maybe it would be Cantavis with the spellcasting or something to that effect. So stay tuned to see what else these players come up with as far as strategies are concerned. And I'll catch you guys in the next cast over.